Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Noble Company podcast. My name is Roanne Smith, and for those of you who are new to the podcast, we discuss contemporary topics in business. We talk with experts, academics, business persons, entrepreneurs from across the world. And today we're looking at a very interesting topic. It's called succeeding in a multi-generational workplace. And if you've ever worked, you know that the workplace is made up of persons of a variety of ages, sometimes up to 5 generations, depending on where you work. So, as you know, because some of us, especially in the Caribbean, live in multi-generational homes, there can be conflict between, say, grandparents or great-grandparents and the younger persons in the family, but it's all love. However, the workplace presents a different dynamic because the kind of bond that family members have does not necessarily translate into workplace interactions. So it is important for us to figure out how we can work together, given our different ideas, our different approaches, to make sure that the interactions are friendly, that work gets done, and that overall the organization achieves success. So today, to help me with this conversation, I'm excited to introduce to you Dr. Brenda Lloyd Jones, aka Dr. Brenda Joy, Lindell Halliday, and Kershonda Miles. Now, well, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, it was very important to me to have different representations of persons on the panel. So we have persons of different ages, different genders, from different cultures, because I don't want to take for granted that in every culture we look at different generations differently. I know that, for example, in Asia, their approach to persons who are more senior is different to maybe in the US or in Western countries. And I also don't want to take for granted that my perspective as a woman on the multi-generational workplace is the same as a male's perspective. So I'm really excited to have all these varied perspectives today, gendered perspectives, generational perspectives, as well as cultured perspectives. And at this time, I'm going to ask my guests to introduce themselves. I'll start with Brenda.
Thank you, Roanne. Yes, I'm Brenda Lloyd Jones, and I am a human relations professor at the University of Oklahoma in the Department of Human Relations in the US of A. And I focus on leadership within the context of gender, certainly race and ethnicity, as well as generational cohorts. I am an author, and I publish on those particular topics. And probably my most favorite passion is public speaking. I enjoy making sure that my messages, my research isn't a prisoner to only academics, but I want to get the information out to those who could actually apply it. And so thank you so much for having me on this podcast, because I am able to do that very thing.
It is my pleasure to have you, Brenda. Thanks so much for coming. And for those of you who haven't gotten the opportunity to read her biography, she's also host of a TV show on a CBS affiliate in the US, where she has a program called Therapy Thursday. So Brenda is a celebrity as well.
Thank you. At least you think so. I appreciate it.
I do. All right. So next, I'm going to have Kershonda introduce herself.
All right, well, good night, everyone. Like Rowan said, my name is Prashanda Miles. Now, I am a final year University of the West Indies student. I study economics and finance here at UWE. Like I mentioned, I'm in my final year, but despite this, I do have a little, I will say, flair on my resume. So I have worked at the Central Bank of Barbados doing an internship there last year, and this summer I would have currently completed my Bloomberg internship in London. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I'm going to boast a little bit about Prashanda, who is actually one of my former students. She is also a Bloomberg campus ambassador. So congrats on that. And
Thank
thank you for
you.
coming on. Lindell? Sure.
Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure being here, especially among such esteemed company. So, my name, Lindell Halliday. I am a business executive. I'm currently located in St. Lucia. My experience spans a number of different sectors: retail and distribution, business process outsourcing, manufacturing, financial services, and consulting. I like to say that I'm a Caribbean person because I have been all around. I have roots. I've lived in 5 different Caribbean countries: St. Kitts, Grenada, Barbados, Trinidad, and now St. Lucia. And I'm also an executive and business coach. And I would say my most fervent passion is the development of people, having people to develop and to achieve their potential, and as well working with entrepreneurs as well. So I'm looking forward very much to tonight's discussion.
Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you for being that male perspective.
You're welcome.
Okay. Before I thank you. Before I move on, I want to credit Brenda for this topic. Um, we were having a discussion, just catching up, getting to learn more about each other. And she was like, well, why don't we talk about succeeding in a multi-generational workplace? And I thought, oh my gosh, that's such an interesting topic because it's something that affects almost everybody. And so I'm really happy that she brought the topic to light, and I'm really excited about having this conversation. And one of the first questions I want to ask is, what are some of the key characteristics or stereotypes associated with the different generations in the workplace? So, what are some of the key characteristics or stereotypes associated with different generations in the workplace? I'll start with you, Linda.
Right. Okay. Okay. So interesting question because you asked about stereotypes and characteristics, and the two can often be in conflict. I remember there's this quote I came across recently where it says that generations are clues, they're not absolutes. And I think it's very important to bear that in mind. So, the different generations, understanding what generation someone is in, can give you a clue. I mean, they're the usual stereotypes that, older persons um, are more conservative, they are more traditional. Younger persons tend to be disruptors. They tend to be a bit more innovative, a bit more tech savvy. So I think those would be the general stereotypes. And I think that on average, there probably is some truth to that. But I think it's also important to remember that everyone is an individual. And so even though we can say that there are, on average, there are these differences, it's important to get to understand each person on an individual level.
All right, thanks, Linda. What about you, Brenda? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, thanks, Linda. You know, if it's okay, I'd like to talk a little bit, preface my comments around generational theory on which this notion of classifying people into age groups it's based on. Because if we can understand how it is designed and the foundation of generational cohorts, we can better apply the strategies connected with it. So, generational theory is based on people around the same age share similar characteristics due to historical events experienced during their formative years. Consequently, those events inform their values, inform their belief system. So, for example, if I am entering a social gathering and I see some individuals. And what you find is that people begin to talk about what they think they might have in common. So if it's music, for example, and someone might say, did you know that Janet Jackson and the Jackson 5 will be in town for a concert? Isn't that exciting? And then we can build on that. I remember when they came out, when they were first introduced, the Jackson 5. And now, why do we all understand the Jackson 5? Because they were introduced to the world during our formative years, and we all can connect to that group because we were around the same time. Now, you ask, for example, a younger generation, they may have to ask their parents, or they may need to do some research because they may not be familiar with the Jackson 5 or Janet Jackson. So, this notion that we connect around historical or social events, and our values are based on them in many ways, and that's how we share characteristics. And it's divided by, or really considered based on the years. So, for example, if you were born during 1946, between 1946 and 1964, then you are considered a baby boomer. And baby boomers are considered optimistic, team oriented, a little bit competitive. They're also loyal to their organizations. And they have been influenced by post war prosperity, the civil rights movement, for example, the Vietnam War for those in the U.S. And so these are, again, characteristics that baby boomers who are born between 1946 and 1964 share. But Generation X, for example, they were born between 1965 and 1980, and they are identified as independent, adaptable. They are very concerned and interested in work-life balance. So these are those employees who are interested in how can they be more efficient at work, because not only do they want to be productive in the workplace, they also want to be productive at home. So those are the two that I centered on in this particular question, baby boomers and Generation X, as well as this notion of classifying people based on the years within which they were born and the social and historical events that they share in common.
All right, thanks so much for that, Brenda. Now I turn over to the Gen Z.
I actually had to go and make sure just now that I am a Gen Z, just to make sure, I didn't want to use the wrong term just now. But those were some really good points that you both made. My contribution would be that I will find more so in my generation now, we see some person more so straying away from the concept of company or job loyalty, whereas more persons now are switching from jobs, say, maybe every 2 to 3 years. So even here in Barbados or even across the region, we're seeing this. So I will say that this is one of the major trends that we're seeing now among my generation.
All right, thanks for that. And I would say, interestingly enough, I'm a millennial, and millennials have a very bad reputation. Um, People blame the millennials for everything. They think that we're lazy, we don't like to work, we're entitled. And I find that very interesting because there's also a debate around the fact that baby boomers have these expectations based on the environment that they grew up in. And so, things were easier back then in terms of home ownership and stability of income. However, our generation has a lot more challenges. We have to deal with lots of inflation. Home ownership is not always as easy for us, but there's the expectation that we're able to have the same things, own the same things, have similar experiences as the baby boomers when we were born into a completely different time. So again, that's not necessarily my perspective, but from my reading about it over the years, those are some of the arguments that I've picked up, and I can definitely see how something like that would influence um, the different approaches in the workplace. And so, another question I would ask is, have you observed any generational dynamics um, in your professional journey? So, have you seen any conflicts between the the different generations in the workplace?
Is this one at
Anybody
me?
can
Or
answer.
I guess I can go first. So, being the youngest, I would say I've seen clashes in terms of persons more so around my age group and more so persons who will be in senior positions and tend to be much older. So, you tend to see a lack or a clash in being able to communicate between the two generational groups. And I think you will see this across like many workplaces, both here and other areas as well. So having being able to properly communicate and learning how to communicate between the generational gaps, I think would be very important moving forward for both businesses and big and large companies.
Mhm. Anybody else?
Right. I think that communication is one of the key ones, and I think at the root of it is perceptions, differences in perceptions and differences in preferences. And part of the challenge when we have any level of diversity is that it is difficult for us to see beyond our own perspective. We normally just default to our perspective, our worldview. And when you're in an environment that has diversity, there are different persons with differences of worldviews who perceive things differently, they may have different styles of communication, then it is inevitable that you're going to get those clashes, particularly if the persons involved don't aren't very intentional in trying to understand the perspective and the differences of the other person.
Anything to add, Brenda?
Sure. Work styles. That's an area that can cause conflict. For example, when I consult with businesses, I often talk with the employees, and for example, the younger generation, they are interested in understanding why do they need to, for example, come to work every day when they could work remotely, and when they could work away from the traditional workplace. They also, and then the older generation, they want to know, if you work right next door to me, why do you need to text me when you can just stick your head in and say hello? And we can meet face to face. And so you have the older generation who thinks that the building rapport, being face to face, is a useful way to uh, build relationships within the workplace. And then you have your younger generations who use social media, or they use other types of devices to communicate. So that this whole notion of communication, work style, why do I need to dress up for work? If we're not having something formal, why do we need to have a dress code? And then in terms of the younger generation, and then there's the older generation who thinks that there is specifically a work attire, and we need to govern ourselves accordingly. So yes, there can be conflict in the workplace over those dynamics.
I would add that I actually had a very interesting experience where I worked. How old? I was about 25 at the time, and my boss was a baby boomer, and he lived in the U.S. So even though I was working from Barbados, I worked from at home, and because we didn't have an established office as yet, and even when we opened an office, he did not require all of us to go into the office. He said, okay, just have one person in the office every day, so that we can man the phones. If anybody comes in, we can answer any queries. And I absolutely loved that. So even though he was a baby boomer and certain persons might think he may be a little bit more traditional, I have to say that another factor is that he also worked in the tech space. So it was a software company. And so again, in different types of organizations, the persons from multiple generations may have different ideas than maybe other generations by virtue of the nature of the company, the type of profession they're involved in. What I found really interesting is that when I went to my next place to work, it was really difficult for me to understand why I had to go into the office every day. So because I was accustomed to working from at home, and I remember once I was really ill, and I shouldn't say I was really ill. I had a flu, and so going into the workplace was not the best for me. But I knew that I could work from at home, and because I had just started within the organization, maybe I was there for a month. I was like, okay, well, let me just work at home for the next couple of days, and they were like, no. Fast forward to COVID-19. Everybody had to start working from at home. And there's still differences in terms of the generations. There's some persons, I guess, based on their professions. There's some teachers who were really happy to get back into the classroom, but then there were some that prefer to work online. So there's so many different factors, including profession, including culture, that actually influence even the generational perspective on work. Now, Renata raises a great point. She said, on the flip side of clashes are opportunities for learning and different perspectives, which is absolutely correct. And my question for you next actually is, what are some of the opportunities that arise from having a diverse mix of generations in the workplace? Thanks for your comment, Renata. Brenda?
Yes, I think that's a great question. I write on the topic of mentoring, and I have delved into this notion and this idea of reverse mentoring. This practice is no longer an idea; it's actually a best practice called reverse mentoring. Traditionally, we have the older, mature, also seasoned individual to mentor the younger, newly entered employee. But reverse mentoring has the younger, less the person who has not necessarily been in the company for the longest length of time. These are the people who provide mentoring to the older generation, if you will. And what we are finding in the literature as well as in actual practice, that we have the older generation learning more about technologies. They are also engaging in new ways of communicating, whether that's stacks or using apps that they had not used before. And they are developing relationships as a result, because when you work together and you're learning, and they also become more collaborative, then they build a better rapport. The office is now more productive. It's also pleasant because people are learning. And what we find also, I think the heart of the matter is that not only are the younger generations teaching the older generations are teaching the younger generations. So the relationship becomes reciprocal, because you cannot work with people without learning something about them if you're really interested in flourishing and thriving professionally as well as personally.
I would
All right.
say, oh,
Go ahead, Krishanda.
sure. So just to add on to the point, I know like in Barbados recently there's like this whole big discussion regarding educational reform, but if we really sit down and look at it, we will see that we've been teaching for almost the same way for years now across generations. And when we're at the classroom, we're speaking to persons who are literally the same age as us, maybe 1 or 2 years off. So we are accustomed to communicating amongst ourselves more so than with other generations. So going into the workplace now, you're now getting the real chance to interact with many persons who tend to not be the same age as you. So sometimes this can be a shock for some persons in that they are not sure how to actually relate with some persons who are older than them. And at the same time, for persons who would have been at the workplace for many years, coming in and seeing someone who's new, it might be like, how do you actually approach someone who may be younger than you, or maybe accomplishing more at a faster rate than when you were at that age? So it's kind of like a very hard dynamic to cope with, because as technology advances as well, I think it's fair to say here in Barbados, I think we are one of the most resistant to changes, especially maybe among the older generation. So having persons who will probably be my age or a little older, or even younger, coming into the workplace using new forms of technology to get tasks done that can be done maybe more efficiently and quickly. It can be such a shock that they are against it, or they're just resistant to learning it. So it all goes back in order to linking the generation groups through education as well as communicating, learning how to communicate amongst the different generational groups.
Thank
Um,
you for sharing that. Linda?
yeah, so two excellent contributions. To add, I think one of the key advantages and opportunities is through better problem solving, better decision making. And this happens anytime you have some level of diversity within a setting. When you have persons of, if everyone is from the same background, same age group, similar values, then persons tend to, there tends to be a convergence that they come up with similar solutions. Um, you run the risk of groupthink, and so that can stifle the creativity and innovation of an organization. Um, when you throw in persons from different generations now who bring these differing perspectives, you're going to find that you may come up with novel ways of doing things that you may not have come up before when you had persons, a much less diverse group. For instance, maybe you're trying to come up with a new marketing campaign and you want to appeal to a wide range of consumers. Um, you will find that the persons, if you having that benefit of persons from different backgrounds, it will enable you to come up with something that may be more appealing. So just the improvement in, I would say, the improvement in decision making, problem solving from having that diversity is one of the key advantages.
Mhm. All right, thank you so much for that. And we have another very interesting comment from English Black Knight. Welcome. He says, COVID has shown us the importance of having different generations. The young people have shown us how to function remotely. They have also shown us how to manage remotely. Unfortunately, matured managers are not ready for that change. We still believe that we have to see people in order to manage them. And he also says we need to embrace having different generations, and most important, that they have a voice, but you have to manage it. So thank you so much for that contribution. And I want to encourage others as well. Please feel free to jump in, give us your comments, ask any questions that you may have. The panel is fully competent. We have a range, like I said, a range of cultures here and ages, gender. So let's throw some questions. Excuse me. And make sure that we make the best use of the panel while we have them here. All right. So yeah, definitely I agree with what you guys have said. Um, I think that there are several opportunities, but persons have to be willing to work with each other. And I love what Brenda mentioned in terms of reverse mentoring. That's not something that I know that I've known of before. Um, is it actually a formal program?
Yes, in fact, there are formal programs that actually set up times, provide opportunities. They have topic areas, subject areas, skill development, as well as knowledge flourishing. However, it could easily be set up informally as well. For example, if there are opportunities for team building, this could be an area in which we could implement this notion of, or this practice of, reverse mentoring, and actually provide a space where someone could demonstrate a skill set that everybody needs to know. I think it's very important for everyone to learn the skills that are required to be productive in the workplace. For example, here at the university, we use as our learning management system, or our LMS, we use Blackboard, this system, for so many years. And then we moved to what is called Canvas. Initially, we were given the opportunity to remain with Blackboard if we so desired, and then others could advance to the new application, Canvas. But what we found was that there were so many new strategies and new applications with Canvas that Blackboard was falling off. And so, what we then did the next year was mandated that everybody move to Canvas so that we could all grow together. We could all use and learn new ways of doing our work more effectively and efficiently. And I think, in addition to mandated that everyone move to Canvas, we also had opportunities to learn how to do it. So some people, they don't want one-on-one interaction in terms of show me how. They would rather have a video. And so they had that opportunity to look at a video to learn how to use the new application. Others wanted more hand holding, if you will. And they had the opportunity to actually go to sessions or have someone come to them to show them how to use it. So I think being a flexible leader is so very important, and taking on a flexible approach whereby everybody's voice can be heard, everybody's preference can be taken into consideration, and people can have a sense of inclusion and belonging, that they matter, and that their learning style, their work style is significant enough to have someone address it.
Mm-hmm. And even because even as we were talking, I thought about how resentment could definitely emerge when you think about a system that's been used for so long being replaced by a newer system, and then being required to sit with a younger person to have them show you how to use it. It could cause persons to feel lesser than, or not capable. And so I love what you talked about in terms of flexibility and the opportunity to have a different kind of options. So if your personality is one where you rather have a video because maybe that's easier for you in terms of your learning style, or even if there's a level of insecurity as it relates to the use of technology, that you're not exposed, but there are various options to be able to choose from, which allows you to kind of maintain your dignity. And I think that that's something that sometimes gets lost in this multi-generational dynamic, because a lot of persons from older generations feel like they're being pushed out of the workplace, feel like if their opinions, their approaches are no longer seen as valid. And so, therefore, there's a kind of apathy sometimes or resentment. So, I think that flexibility is actually, like you mentioned, very important. No, anybody else? Sorry, anybody else has anything to add?
I would say one of the key ways to succeed in a multi generational workplace is to have a mixture of ages and gender in the management positions. So, for example, if you're able to have persons who are older and more seasoned, as you would like to say, as well as having a set of persons who may be new to the workplace but have that more fresh mindset straight out of university, who can come with new theoretical solutions that can be applied to certain problems in the workplace. When you have that mixture, young persons within the workplace, regular full-time employees get that opportunity to see someone who's around their age and feel like their voices can be heard, as well as for the much older persons of the workplace. They can also see persons in management positions of similar age and also get that voices being heard. So having that mixture, I think, would be a good way to help succeed and make sure everyone's feeling included in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting about that is in previous generations, promotion, and sometimes in government as well, right now, promotions are based on seniority. And so persons expect that because they've been in the organization for a long time. Again, when we think about what Brenda mentioned earlier about, what was going on in, somebody's formative years, there's all these expectations that have been built. So when I reach a certain age, when I've worked at an organization for a certain amount of years, the expectation is that I get a promotion. A millennial comes into the organization and thinks sometimes, okay, I have a degree, I'm competent, I'm ready. And so they feel like they should be getting the opportunities. And sometimes when the opportunity presents itself to them, again, persons who are more senior don't understand, because again, the way that the organization is managed has shifted, and there's not always an understanding of that shift, or a communication of that shift that allows persons, like I said, to maintain their dignity or to feel comfortable. And so I think that that's also a challenge that arises. So definitely flexibility and communication are things.
Roanne, may I interject?
Sure.
what I often when I mentor millennials, I often tell them, yes, you're the smartest, you're the brightest, and they are, and you know so much in terms of technology, but you also have to have interpersonal skills. You also must know how to lead people, and you must know how to develop human relation skills, because it's just not being very smart. It's not knowing how to use the various digital platforms and technologies, but it's also how do you interact effectively with people? How do you communicate with them? And so perhaps we can work on skill development and knowledge flourishing in those areas so we can combine those. And now you become a more holistic individual who knows more than technology, but also knows about the dynamics of people and groups and what makes them thrive in the workplace.
I
Mm-hmm.
think that goes back to my point as well, where I mentioned we're accustomed interacting with persons in terms of at school with persons who are our age. So we're also forced to learn like the technical skills. So we learn math, English, we learn those technical skills, but being able to have that soft level, being able to interact with persons, I think also needs to be incorporated into like the educational system, so we have a good set of mixture between both technical and soft skills. So we're producing persons who can do the work but can also explain how they're doing it, being able to lead person, maybe even being able to do certain sessions that you would have mentioned, interact and have that reverse learning as you would have mentioned.
I think one of the opportunities to bridge the gap in the workplace is with project teams and committees. So most workplaces have, different types of committees, with a safety committee, events planning committee, and so forth. So um, we can start there in terms of having a representation from persons of different age groups. So then you may have persons who are young who may have great technical skills. Maybe they may be lacking in certain other areas. But by interacting with other persons, older persons within these committees or project teams, then they get the opportunity to round off their skills. And then the other advantages, of course, are these committees and these teams get to benefit from their input. And then the whole workplace is better off for it as a result as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good point, because when I think about, again, diverse teams, often I don't hear persons talk about persons from different generations. I hear about race, I hear about gender identity, but I don't necessarily hear persons talking about um, different generations. So I think that that's actually a really good idea in terms of prioritizing that. And like Krishanda talked about, in terms of management positions, having persons of different generations. And to take that even further, maybe on boards, we have a thing in Barbados. I can't speak to the rest of the world, where I feel like sometimes we recycle the same person over and over again. So the person that chairs this board today is the chair of another board in next year. And so it's just the same persons going around in a circle. And in order to achieve diverse perspectives, I mean, that's not the way. A lot of times the board actually sets up the direction, the strategy for the organization. And if there's not diverse perspectives, generational perspectives, there's really an opportunity, or rather, we lose the opportunity to sometimes even be relevant to our markets, because we don't know how to reach them.
Mhm.
And that's from either perspective, because there are some persons that when they do their marketing, that maybe the company is a tech company or a younger company, and they assume that the only persons that use their products or services are from a younger generation. And so they don't advertise or they don't promote their products to more senior persons. And those persons actually are a potential market for the product, but they're completely ignored, and that's a loss of revenue. So, definitely coming out of this conversation, the need for adding the generational perspective as a diverse perspective is very important.
Oh, if
So,
I could just say one more thing before we move on to the next point. I think it's also important. I know we just had a pandemic, we're social distancing, we're working from home, but coming out of it, I think we need to incorporate more form of events or activities where persons of different ages and generations can come together and interact, whether it be some form of a networking event or just something of that sort, where we can have that opportunity to sit down in an informal setting where there's no stress on you, there's no one like forcing you, where you can have that opportunity to connect with persons who are not in your age group.
mhm. All right, thanks for that. Anybody else want to add anything before we move on to the next question? Okay. Well, I think one of the things that has emerged from this conversation as relates to leadership qualities are, flexibility. So leaders need to be flexible. What are some of the other leadership qualities that are essential for successfully navigating a multi-generational workplace? Linda?
Hmm. So I would say empathy and open-mindedness for sure. And I guess open-mindedness pairs very well in terms of flexibility. Um, I think that's one of the most critical ones. You have to be able to see beyond your own perspectives. And in terms of empathy, you have to be able to sometimes try to see things from the other person's perspective, try to see things from their own point of view. Um, and I think when you are able to do that, then you're more likely to be able to create an inclusive environment. You're more likely to understand how to adapt your leadership style to different persons, because there's no one size fits all for leadership. You change your perspective, you change your behavior based on the situation. And part of that situation or context is the individual as well. So if you're dealing with someone who is um, younger, for instance, who um, perhaps you in terms of communicating with them, you need to do it in a way that maybe is a bit more makes them feel more included, makes them feel like you're being collaborative. Perhaps you will find the days of the older top-down um, style to leadership is I think those days are pretty much gone. But you may find within a lot of organizations that you have persons who are older that may be the default position and may be okay for some persons. But you really have to understand that that is not the style that most persons, particularly younger persons, prefer. So you have to adapt your style, you have to adapt your approach.
All right, thanks, Linda. Prashanda?
Have you ever heard the term know your customer? I would like to introduce a new term. I remember when you were teaching me that business communication class, you always spoke to me about knowing your audience, knowing what your message, who are you trying to send a message to. So it's important. So like I know we mentioned like the flexibility, but it's important to know your audience in order to get that message across. So having a reason why you're communicating and knowing who the persons you're speaking to are is the best way to succeed in a leadership role, because You don't want to be using, for example, what would be called slang or young people terms to someone who may be older than you and may not even understand or know. For example, when we were the first like introduced texting, we were using acronyms like HRU for how are you, or like those kind of things. It's important to know who you're speaking to, know their communication preferences and their styles, and being able to adjust to accurately and successfully deliver your message in a successful way.
Can you see this smile? My student acknowledging and remembering what I taught her. Well, thank you. Thank you, Krishanda. That makes me feel very special.
You're welcome.
All right, Brenda.
Yes, it's always great when your student remembers what you shared with them or taught them and then uses it on their professor's podcast. Very good. Mhm. Well, I wrote this book. I wrote a chapter. I co-wrote a chapter in this book, and it's called "Diversity in the Workplace: Current Issues and Emerging Trends." And the third edition is coming out in 2024, early. But the one I wrote two chapters, but the one chapter I'm referring to is intergenerational tensions in the workforce. And one of the leadership uh, practices or skills that I write about is about clear communication. And this involves discussing expectations, deliverables, and how the employees' work can meet the company's goals while accommodating the employees' preferred work style. Because the bottom line, if we don't meet the company's goals, if we don't bring in the revenue, then our jobs, our positions are in jeopardy. However, if we can meet the company's goals using our preferred work style, having a sense of belonging, having our ideas included, working in a collaborative style, then not only can we make money for the company and ourselves and our as our livelihoods, but we can also enjoy our workplace and we can flourish and thrive in the workplace. Clear communication also involves listening. We always get brownie points for being able to articulate and convey our messages and speak in a way that moves people. We get very little, we are very, often we're not incentivized to listen. But listening is, according to some social scientists, our least developed skill. And and how can we improve our listening? By listening without interrupting, listening and also sharing with the speaker what it is we heard them say, or and then applying what they want us to know. So, in addition to listening, we want to show that we actually took into account their ideas and show them how we've used it, give them credit for their idea, and find ways in which we can actually make sure that everyone feels listened to. Everyone has an opportunity to communicate, and that we do it as leaders through our example. We want to be a role model in terms of giving clear communication, including uh, great listening skills, impeccable listening.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Brenda. And we have English Black Knight again, adding his 2 cents. He said, respect, patience, and giving everyone an opportunity to be heard. And English Black Knight is also a very seasoned professional. And so he understands what it is to manage a team and how to manage a team with persons from different generations. So thank you so much for signing in and giving us your input. He has a question, however. Um, he missed the name of the book and the authors. So Brenda, can you share that with me so that I can put it in the comments?
I'm happy to do that. Certainly. Thanks for asking.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay, so I can get that from you afterward, and I will share it on the different platforms, whether it be LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. So thank you so much for that. Now, we've had a lot of discussion about what leaders can do, but how about what, and the leaders are generally, well, often more senior persons within the organization. But what advice would you give to younger persons who are coming into the workplace and how they should interact with more senior persons in the organization? I'll start with Prashanda.
Okay, so speaking to everyone out there who's my age, I know we are now coming out of university. Do not think that your university degree means you know everything going into this workplace. I think we take it for granted because we spent 3 to 4 years studying that we know it all and that we're ready to go and tackle these challenges. When I was going to work at Bloomberg, one of the first things I did was being open to new ideas and perceptions. So going into a new workplace, ignore the different or the current stereotypes that you would hear or see on different media. Go in there with an open mind and be willing to learn. And like Dr. Brenda would have mentioned, being able to listen. When you're able to listen, then you're able to respond accurately and effectively. So those would be my key areas and tips for someone not going into the workplace in order to be successful.
All right, Linda.
Yeah, so a couple of things I would say. So going back to what I said earlier, that quote that generations are clues, not absolute. So be wary of stereotyping people. You don't want to be coming into the workplace as a younger person and, you know, falling into this um, trap that thinking that, okay, well, this person is older, so they're not going to know anything about technology. They're not going to understand my perspective. So remember, everyone is an individual. So understanding the differences between generations can give you a clue, but approach everyone with an open mind and don't pigeonhole, don't stereotype persons. So yeah, so I would say that, and you just try to be um, open-minded. Yeah.
All right, Brenda.
I agree with the two panelists. It is important to not stereotype others and to make sure, for example, here at the university in my department, probably, and this employee would say that they are the oldest, but they have the best website that they made themselves, they created themselves. They stay on top of the new devices, applications. We asked this particular employee questions about technology. So again, as Linda pointed out, uh, we need to value people as individuals. In a similar context, however, or divergent context, we also want to make sure that we look at the literature and the research and use it to our advantage. For example, I think we know that certain generations seem to value respect. They value interpersonal skills. They value uh, having a sense of belonging. So, for example, after an interview, there's nothing wrong with sending an email saying, "Thank you for this opportunity. I enjoyed learning more about your company. As you can see from my resume, many of my skill sets align with the opportunity that you have with the position there's nothing wrong with sending an email. You may not have to, write or the card or mail it, in the traditional way, but you want to acknowledge the opportunity. So those are interpersonal skills I don't think will ever go out of style. And they can only make you stand out because now you're the only one who acknowledged the opportunity, the time spent with you, the energy spent by the interviewer, for example, and you are placed typically at the head of the class. So I think understanding that interpersonal skills are important, that human relation skills are important, and that people enjoy being recognized for the time and certainly the expertise that they've expended.
Quickly, because our time is, running out. Time went really quickly. um, in your research or experiences, have you found differences between, say, the different genders or the different cultures as it relates to multi-generational interaction? So, for example, uh, do women from different generations tend to get along better with better than men from different generations? Um, what has been your experience with that? Anybody, Brenda?
Well, the research shows that there are generations that seem to have more similarities than other generations. For example, the traditionalists, which they are called pioneers, they are the oldest generation living. They seem to have quite a bit of in common with Gen X, in that they value the family, they value being trustworthy, they value loyalty. And so I think when you have those value systems that are congruent, you typically have people who work together well because they see through a similar lens, and consequently that those lenses are not in conflict. I do think we can learn, though, to work with one another, even if we do have different value systems. For example, the literature shows that Gen Zs, they are very interested in causes. They not only want to bring in a paycheck, they want to know that their time and their energy and their expertise is expended on something that's worthwhile, that will make a difference, that matters. And so, if I know that as a leader, whether I am a Gen X uh, or I am a baby boomer or a traditionalist, I can look for opportunities and find ways in which the entire department, for example, can work along with this idea of making sure that we work for causes or we volunteer for things that make a difference. And this way, more people can learn how work can really lend itself to outside of the borders of the organization and move into, for example, community engagement, community service. But we're still working, making sure that the company's goals are met. But at the same time, we have an interest in community opportunities.
May,
All
may
right,
I ask,
go ahead, Linda.
may I ask Brenda a question?
Yes.
So, what does the literature show in terms of the characteristics of the different defined generations, boomers, millenniums, Gen X, etc., translate how in an international context beyond the United States?
Oops, I think we lost. Okay, she's coming back on.
Okay.
Hi, we can see you and hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So I have this article that I just ran across, Lindell. You asked me at the perfect time. And it's called Management. And they've spelled management, but in the middle of management is age, AGE, and they've enlarged age. So management. The challenges of global age diversity for corporations and governments. And so this article takes on a global tone and uh, con- contingent. One of the arguments or one of the tenets is contingent on that particular country's value system. For example, if they're collectivist community or identified as an individualist community or country, they will have characteristics that fall within those particular classifications. And so what's valued there, if, for example, if it's an individualist culture, which USA is in terms of we have valedictorians, we have the first place, the winner individuals, as opposed to other countries that they look at the group. How can we all be winners? How can we all grow and flourish? And so if your question is if the characteristics are different in terms of a global sense based on the various countries, I would say the literature supports that. The values, the belief systems of that particular country will certainly have an influence and inform how individuals work together and how they see their job within a particular company.
Well, well, kind of continuing on what you were talking about, Brenda, as it relates to Gen Zs and their attachment to causes, I would like to ask for Shonda if she finds that to be the case. And the reason I'm asking is, again, from a marketer perspective, I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues who's also an academic, and we were talking about whether Gen Zs in Barbados or the Caribbean can be characterized the same way. And so, would you say, Krishanda, that Gen Zs in our culture are also very attached to causes?
I would say yes. I
Mm.
would say that I say that because we will see recently, especially in Barbados, there are a lot of young people rising and speaking out about different causes, whether it be persons at university where it starts in terms of at the Guild at the University of the West Indies. So I would say yes because we're seeing a lot of different young people rising up and speaking about different causes. And to go back to the other point, I would say that overseas, I found persons my age were more so interested and more connected to like different issues that were happening in the world. But here in Barbados, it seems that still there's a little disconnect in terms of like different issues that maybe even just happening in the country or in the region, for example. So yes, overall I would say yes, but there are those few individuals who are not connecting and speaking about different issues and not even paying attention to what's happening. And going back to how that relates in the workplace, then, well, while I was overseas, I found that the culture over there, they tend to be more community based, as you would have mentioned. So they cared a lot about the environment or they'd be volunteering at different charities or organizations. But here in Barbados, we don't really see a lot of volunteering. There are a few activities every now and again, but I think it's important that we start to build that community base within the company through giving back to either charities or representing different causes. For example, recently we started doing where places in Barbados started acknowledging Down Syndrome Day, where everyone will put on the socks. So
Yeah.
that is a recent trend in Barbados. So I will say yes, we are getting there, but there's still a ways to go.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much for that. That was actually really good insight. And I am going to give everybody the opportunity to give some parting words, as well as to let us know where we can find you or reach you if we need to. So I'll start with Lindell.
Okay. Well, thank you. This has been a quite enjoyable, informative discussion. It's just great getting a perspective from a Gen Z perspective as well as the academic insight was I found was very educational for me as well. So I would say that overall it's just multi-generational workplaces. Let's embrace the differences. Let's embrace the diversity. Um, it's important to just, most important thing is to be open-minded and have a culture of respect and just um, be willing to learn from the other persons. And I think if we do that, then we can we significantly enhance our chances of success.
Okay. Uh, Brenda.
Mhm. Yes, I echo Lindell's notion of embracing everyone in the workplace. If we're fortunate to continue living, we will also be known as an older generation. So we have certainly goals to reach. I would implore people to use this generational cohort theory as a way to better understand individuals. Just as we talk about personalities, are you an introvert or you extrovert? This is another opportunity to understand how can we get along better, how can we make the workplace more harmonious, and how can we be not only productive but also pleasant and certainly enjoy the workplace. I want people to want to come to work and they find a sense of joy at work because they are working in ways that make a difference for so many people, not only their livelihood and their own families. And so, using this notion and taking the information from this generational uh, theory and applying it in our multi generational workplace, I think can have positive benefits. Again, I agree with Lindell. We want to move away from stereotyping and remember to take in the people as individuals. However, there is research that suggests that if you are born within the same years, usually a 10 to 20-year span, a generation, you have social and historical connections that influence your value and your belief system. And consequently, you have things in common and can build on that in relationships, both personally and professionally. You can contact me on LinkedIn. I'd love for you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and that's where I talk about Therapy Thursday information that TV viewers ask questions, and I try to respond to them based on my knowledge and also based on academic findings. So YouTube, I'm at Dr. Brenda Joy, and you can find me there.
Okay. Thank you so much, Brenda. Krishanda.
I would echo the sentiments of the other panelists, but I will go a step further to say that I think, especially here in Barbados, we need to move away from the ideology that we go to work just to get a paycheck. We need, when we're going to the workplace, we should be there getting to meet people, be interested in building relationships. I think we have strayed away from that concept of seeing people as opportunities or just being going to work and that's just another person at work. I think we need to grow and be more interested in forming relationships with the persons that we work with, getting to know who they are because you never know what that person may be going through. On the other hand, you never know how that person may influence your life in such a big way. For example, Rowan, I always reach out to you and tell you, like, doing that course with you and actually talking to you outside of like learning has definitely like shaped my life a major way. Getting that opportunity to go
Thank
overseas to work in Bloomberg in London. So I think we need to really dive into the fact that people are opportunity. It's important to build relationships with the people that you're working with in order to just because you're going to work and you're spending most of your time at work. I think we tend to keep our home life and our work life separate. Yes, for the reasons that work life balance, but it's so important to have that connection at work and be able to enjoy your time while you're at work.
you. Okay, thank you so much, Prashanda, and thank you so much for your kind words as well. Um, and I want to thank everybody who has was a part of this panel. I really appreciate your contribution, and like Lindell said, it's always really important to me to get different perspectives because I think that sometimes we exist in this little box that
Mhm.
maybe our country, maybe our homes, our friend groups, and we don't take enough time to really hear what other people are saying, what other person's experiences have been. And I always advocate um, getting a different perspectives. And one of the really important things for me with this podcast is one for Caribbean people to take their perspectives to the world because I think that we have very important things to say. And so I think that it's important for us, for our perspective to get out there. But I also think that it's important for us to hear what other people have to say. And so I always love to have these discussions where I have different perspectives. Sophia, thank you so much for being on. Sophia said, excellent discussion. I am happy that you enjoyed it. And I just want to let you know that this is our last episode for this season. So we resume in January. And in January, we have some more interesting stuff for you. So we're looking to not only have our monthly podcast, but Noble Company is actually looking at introducing some more activities as well. So thank you so much for your support during the year. Without you, this would not be possible. So thank you so much for being here. I wish you all the best for the holidays. For those of you who are in Barbados, happy independence in advance. And for those of you abroad, again, happy holidays, happy new year. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the new year. Take care and have a good night. Bye.